Good morning, everybody. I have the absolute pleasure to kick us off today in terms of the speakers, obviously, not as what has just gone before, but I'm really honored to be able to share just a little bit of information about the work that I've done as an individual, as a professional, but most importantly then, what has evolved to the work that we are doing at Adidas. And this is a conversation about the message here, which probably to many of you sounds like common sense. Thinking big, acting small, staying focused. And what I want to have a conversation about is the difference between knowing and doing. And I think that the experience that I've had working for different brands, I've spent a lot of time on what I refer to as intellectual vacations, talking about the future, talking about sustainability, talking about innovation, a word that, despite my job title, I particularly despise because I don't think it means anything. We were just having a conversation earlier. It's one of those jobs where all it really means is I get an inbox full of interesting ideas that are yet to be proven as useful solutions to the human species, which is something that is very, very interesting to me. So I particularly love human beings. Been studying them now for 20 plus years, all through the lens of technology. And I genuinely believe that the most exciting technology on the planet is the human. And thinking about how, as a technology, we are ready to be perfected. So did anyone today get dressed by accident? I'm not seeing any hands up. But think about the fact that we all, assuming everyone showered, we all started naked. And then we built something. And what I found fascinating is those of us that work in sports, whether that's the creation of products, whether it's the creation of environments, events, we are building something for this unfinished species to then build themselves to then be able to perform. And so that speaks to this really interesting reality that humans are malleable. We're not quite finished, and so those of us that choose to partner with humans to finish them for a task, for an event. I mean, if you think about whether you did a good job at intentionally dressing yourself today, I mean, not everyone probably gave it a lot of thought. I shall not point any fingers. I'm not a fashionista. But most importantly, I want everyone to think about the humanity of making decisions within an organization, whether that's about sustainability, innovation, business decisions, or otherwise. So we'll start there. We'll start at the beginning. Thinking big. I keep looking the wrong way. Thinking big. Now, we are encouraged, certainly if we work in innovation, to think big all of the time. The challenge is that there are lots of stimulus around us, that thinking big then is distracting to what we are not doing. And there's a big danger to that, because if we consider that thinking big is what the prevailing or new technology means to us, then we're forgetting something, which is what should we do with our brand, our company, our business, our institute uniquely? So I'd like to offer just an insight to a little simple tool that we use, that I've been using for a number of years now, on how to think big. And there's a phrase that I like to use, which is learn or look through the eyes of your organization, and be careful not to over-personalize them for yours. So there are 3 questions. What does the world need most right now? First question. And what might the world need most if you can just see a little bit into the horizons? Now, our recommendation is not to look too far into those horizons. It's just too volatile at the moment to consider that what we should be doing is doing 10 or 100-year plans. We still do them, but we have to contingency plan around all of the little realities that are coming at us thick and fast, whether that's a pandemic or conflict or or other massive issues that require ingenuity to get around, the same skills that most of us that spend our lives in innovation are applying. So what does the world need most? Now, really importantly, and what are you most qualified to do? And then lastly, which is my favorite one, and what is actually humanly possible? Now, if you think about these three questions and take it, if I put that in the realms of Adidas, so what does the world need most? Shout out, what does the world need at the moment? Love? Peace? Happiness? Well-being? There's a theme. Sorry? Connection. So the world has all of these needs. What is Adidas most qualified to do? Be a sports company. That's actually that's really only what we're qualified to do. So then the big piece of alchemy is, can a sports company be the solution to those world needs? And if not, we're in trouble. Because we're not then thinking at the level of big that is really important for us to address some of humanity's concerns. The question is how, because our business model is based upon selling shoes and clothes. So how can the sales of shoes and clothes affect well-being, connection, love, peace? Well, we have to think a lot about our fundamental purpose. And our fundamental purpose is, through sport, we have the power to change lives. But the big question then is how? How do we do that with shoes and clothes? So the what is humanly possible gets us into understanding, okay, there's some big problems out there. We're a sports company. How should we start to measure ourselves differently? And how should we start to challenge our business model uniquely? And there's an interesting fact that we spend a lot of time, I guess, coercing in the organization, which is based on prospect theory. I don't know if anyone is as nerdy as me and studies, all of the sciences of human, but prospect theory is the foundations of behavioral economics. And what it suggests is you are 2 times more likely to fight for what you have than chase what you could have. Which I think is why most of us, when we think about talking about the future, talking about this world that we fear, the places that we would like to go, it's an excellent act of knowing what should be done. But we can almost guarantee, as soon as we've departed from that intellectual vacation, we're going to go back to work and do pretty much the same thing. So we've thought big. We've thought about how sport can change and shape the world and meet the needs of achieving love, connection, peace, because it's kind of a perfect vehicle for things like that. But we get used to our limitations, and then we prefer the familiar. So if you are able to identify what is most familiar to you, and you understand that the limitations as an organization, as a group of individuals, are completely fabricated by you, then you have a chance at doing something a little bit more different or unique in the world. So I want to talk about three different case studies. So I started my, proper career at Speedo, where actually I spent a lot of time here at EPFL battling with the academics who were put in charge to create the testing systems that eventually banned all of our products, which was, I'm now really good friends with the professor, and actually there's a test that happens here for the testing of the suits called the Tom Waller Bastard test, because it now takes 3 times longer to do the tests than when they originally imagined. So I don't know whether to be proud of that or not. But what was interesting with Speedo is, this is a 40% market shareholder of performance swimming. But performance swimming is a tiny part of the industry. So on one hand, we had an innovation team, a group of individuals who are excellent at breaking world records, excellent at supporting athletes to achieve the peak of performance. And yet the transition of those concepts, the ability to take all of those inventions and make them available to the rest of us, was really challenging. So we had this dissonance, this gap between the headlines and the bottom line. And so this was the sort of the beginning of the journey of, okay, we understand that at a thinking big level, we know how to move human beings through this alien substance called water. But we have no idea how to scale our business beyond that. And what it turned out was like the mission there, the how do we fight our limitations there, was all about how do we make it so that we are the ones that are actually wrong, that we don't understand our business well enough to drive the gears of change and create value for our organization beyond achieving headlines and gold medals. So a subtle mission, but a really important one, because what it allows us to do is have that breakthrough as an innovation team when we know massive change is possible, but bring in some humility that we know we have to be part of the business to shape it. So then moving on to Lululemon. Has everyone heard of Lululemon? No? Some people? Yeah. It wasn't long ago when no one had a clue what I was talking about. Lululemon. Yeah. But this was a really fascinating organization because it was right at the beginning of its existence. And it didn't really know where to grow. But there were products that people had this strange, visceral obsession, passion, loyalty to. And we would see people stroking their legs and each other's legs. And we think, like, what's going on here? And I joined the company, and we were a primarily female, primarily yoga apparel retailer. And as soon as I landed, I was like, no, this is a health and well-being company, if there ever was one in the world. Because look at the things that we're doing. We just need to reframe ourselves so that we can open up our opportunity. So I said, so what's the secret sauce? And the secret sauce was I was searching for what is it that we do that make people really love us and love the products that we create. And I was told something dismissive like, oh, it's just the quality and our attention to detail, and we put the athlete first, all of the stuff that every brand on the planet has said at some point. And what it turned out is the source was so secret, no one knew actually what it was. So the mission at at Lululemon, was about reverse engineering what it was that we actually did uniquely. And what we did was we created a very specific sensory flavor. And Cody will talk about this in a little bit more. We turned the human body on in such a way that people felt a different kind of confidence to then go into the act of well-being. You know, doing well-being is not easy. We all know what to do. We don't necessarily know how to do it, and we don't choose to do it because there's always cake and coffee around the corner. And then lastly, Adidas. So this is a business that 80% of the world's population knows who we are. So what better platform is there to tackle one of the biggest issues, going back to that first question, which is the world knows that it has lots of problems. It doesn't necessarily know that sport is a viable solution. Yet what we know is around about a quarter, certainly 1 in 4 males, 1 in 3 females are not getting enough of the daily or weekly prescribed exercise. It's 1.4 billion people. If we can just increase the level of participation of sport in the world, we'll see healthcare costs go down, we'll see mental health improve, physical health will obviously improve. So a massive, massive platform. It's not about running a marathon faster or necessarily getting the winning goal at a World Cup final. We want those things to happen as well. But fundamentally, we're here to improve sport. But whilst those are big ideas, there's something really interesting, which is there are lots of people like me in the world having the similar experience that I have, which is we have these great ideas, we even build out and plan and invest in the perfect solutions, and we bring them to the organization, and the organization rejects them wholesale. And so why is that? Well, fundamentally, we're talking about the mixing of oil and water, the future to the present, the business that we could become with the business that we have to be. And too often, innovation or R&D teams, they make the business wrong. They will start to suggest that the institute, the company, is stuck in the past, they don't know what they're talking about. But the reality is, there are critical KPIs that, if not met, the bill of innovation does not get paid. And I think that there's this shift that we need to start to acknowledge, that those of us that are game changers, change makers in the world, our job, number one, is to learn, if not as well, ideally better, the key performance indicators of the whole organization. Because then we can start to shift our perspective, which is we're not activists within a brand trying to encourage sustainable behaviors. If we've got healthy people, they're going to make better, more sustainable decisions in every aspect of the business. But we will likely, if we don't do this carefully, if we don't own the KPIs, everyone in the organization, even down to, okay, there's a quarterly earnings call coming up. Are we watching that, knowing whether we'll be successful? For example, one of the organizations we had, Lululemon, give an example. We had one product that we were building that only had a 20 to 30% margin, gross margin, which is really bad news when your average is 70%. So can you imagine going to your merchandising partners, your sales partners, and saying, I want you to take a 40% hit on your profitability? It's like, you have to because it's innovation. And they're like, screw you, we got a business to run. So what we were able to do is break down that 40% and treat it as an investment. We were able to show it back to the business and say, here is how the investment of that 40% breaks down. And in 2 years' time, that will be 10%. And in 3 years' time, we start to see a pricing elasticity, which takes it to increasing the price point, maybe even owning a market share that we didn't have before. So one of the problems that a lot of innovation teams have is that they get owned by the measure. They don't choose to own the measure. So something that we have to think about. Same with sustainability. We can chase certain measures that ultimately are not going to have the big impact that we want to see, or we can all own the right measures that are going to get us to end of life, circularity, and a net zero end game. Then lastly, staying focused. So this is a little model that we put together. And again, it's just going back to understanding the reality of human behavior. So there's a difference between, as I said at the beginning, what we know and what we do. So who here knows that you shouldn't eat too much cake? Who here knows that you should sleep probably a bit more than you do? Who here knows that you should love everyone that you have a relationship with? Who here knows that being physically active regularly is very healthy? Would anyone like to rate themselves 10 out of 10 for all of those things? 0. So there's what we know and there's what we do. And there's a really interesting reality is that as humans, we are lazy. We were evolved into a place of famine and scarcity. And so when we have excess, we consume. And so when we have something that is sweet and delicious and full of fat, we go for it. If we have a headache, we don't go root cause. We reach for paracetamol or ibuprofen or any other painkiller. And so great companies, and you think about thinking big, breaking a problem down into simple KPIs that even the business is familiar with. Staying focused then is about meeting people with something delicious and then managing them through to eventually the future that we can see. So if we put the Brilliant Basics as the business of us being a sporting organization that meets more of the world's needs, we still have to accept that the quick fix is a faster shoe, a more comfortable t-shirt. People have to be able to experience sport in the most delicious and delightful way instantly and see those heroes, those individuals, and feel that attachment to them. And then we need to move them through structured intent, these programs, these places. I mean, the beauty of sport is that it is entirely structured. And then that takes us into eventually the Brilliant Basics. So it's a bit based on just habit theory. And, oh, I didn't have the model up. That's the model. So just to finish up, this is a sort of a really powerful image and a bit of a metaphor for what I'm trying to talk about here. So I don't know if anyone knows, this is Kathrine Switzer. She was the first person to officially run the Boston Marathon, 1967. And this was in a world where it was believed by scientists that it was unhealthy, dangerous for women to run endurance sports. Of course, that's not true. However, because of that prevailing knowledge, it created an infrastructure, a business model that was then resistant to any kind of change. So Kathrine wasn't actually the first woman to run the marathon. So Bobby Gibb, 1966, she ran the Boston Marathon, but in disguise, and she hid in a bush at the start line. So yes, it happened, and it proved that it was possible, but it didn't create the shift. And I like to think of this image as being really clear about all organizations seeking change. So Kathrine is the innovator. Kathrine is the thing that we should probably do, the thing that we have to become as an organization. And then you see the chap in the suits, the jock. He's the organizer of the race. He's the business model. He's the familiarity. He's the person trying to hold us back, saying, hang on a minute, you can't do that. That's not allowed. And then the person closest to Jock, who happens to be an all-American football player, Tom, is Kathrine's partner. And he is quite delicately moving Jock out the way. And then there's Arnie, the coach, just behind Tom, who has made sure that this is possible and is backing up the innovator as they're moving forward. So this is like incredibly powerful image. Someone had a big thought about endurance sports being available to all people. The small act of entering that race and proving that it's possible, and then staying focused by making sure there's infrastructure around and ensuring that people can progress to the end. And I think it was a 4-hour 20 finish for the first ever recorded Boston Marathon by a female. But it's the metaphor for us. And I said, if sport has the power to change lives, the how is unlocking the super in all humans. So this is our thinking big. And our acting small is all of the products and experiences that we create and everything that you see in the platform of sport. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for your patience and attention.